My friends, what the intelligence satellites and the hidden microphones of international diplomacy have picked up in the last few hours is not just another empty statement of condemnation.
What happened in Washington is not bureaucracy.
It is Brazil being formally, coldly, and surgically removed from the adults' table. And since we are in an election period, let's call it.
The mollusk has just signed in the middle of the most important forum in the Americas what we call the kiss of death for Brazil's influence and historical weight on the continent. Pay attention to the level of the geopolitical game. Nicaragua, under the iron fist of Daniel Ortega, has openly declared the end of elections. You, who follow me, already know this. The dictator tore up his constitution and decided to show his true colors by announcing permanent terms in office and the official elimination of any opposition. We will no longer have elections in Nicaragua, he said, and he did this through a fatal miscalculation. Exactly during the return of Donald Trump and his hardline faction back in command of the White House. There is no such thing as coincidence in global chess. It's written in stone in the Trump administration's playbook that dictatorships that challenge the stability of the Western Hemisphere by flirting with the enemies of the West will not be tolerated. In the direct sphere of influence of the United States of America. Yes, my friends. And guess what? Brazil, the giant of South America that is dragging itself into obsolescence, rushed to do.
It rushed to smooth things over. It tried to block, downplay, and coddle the regime that oppresses its own citizens.
The Organization of American States, the OAS, stepped up to call for an unprecedented continental response. And Brazilian diplomacy chose to position itself as the devil's advocate, throwing Itamaraty's historic prestige down the drain to defend a petty dictator.
Brazil is digging its own diplomatic grave.
Now that you know this, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like on the video because it takes a lot of work to make it.
And now you must be asking yourself, but isn't Itamaraty the home of humanism and the defense of the oppressed?
This is exactly where you're mistaken. This is where the veil of lies falls and reality bleeds.
There is a sick contradiction at the heart of the current Brazilian government's foreign policy. Itamaraty travels to Europe preaching human rights.
But why is Brazil's complacent and complicit silence the exact fuel that Daniel Ortega uses to dismantle his own country's constitution and oppress his own people? There is no humanitarian principle here. Survival? Ideological? When the dictator of Venezuela was arrested in the middle of the night in January 2026, Lula woke up in absolute panic. The shock of reality shook the halls of the Planalto. He summoned generals, and the question was direct, blunt, and terrifying. Can we defend ourselves from something like that? The response from the Minister of Defense and the military leadership was ice cold, no. If they arrive, the gates will be opened because there is no real defense. The Brazilian president knows that he can't ally himself ideologically with Trump's United States and pragmatically doesn't have the strength to confront them. What is left for the aging relic? It's the desperate tactic of trying to buy time. And in the process of buying this time, he makes the biggest strategic blunder possible. He uses international diplomatic channels to protect a regime that's already in the Pentagon's sights. And look at this example of foolishness. The Brazilian ambassador to the OAS, following direct orders from Brasilia, had the audacity to take the microphone and to categorically state that the end of democracy and the mass exile of Nicaraguan citizens are not a risk to hemispheric stability. A woman who defends migrants seeking dignity. She turned a blind eye to the fact that Ortega expels Nicaraguans and criminally cancels their passports, stripping them of their nationality. In a cheap replica of what the Brazilian legal system has already tested at home with recent political opponents. And this is serious. It needs to reach millions of Brazilians. That's why you can exclusively sponsor this episode using the super thanks below or the information that's appearing on your screen right now.
I don't have the card. I can't do it. It's too much technology for me. Use the QR code, the Pix that's available for you.
Our elite analyst community is the fastest growing community on YouTube today. You can be sure you're in the right place.
Now we need to spell out the immediate impact of these diplomatic moves, because the rehearsed language of the ambassadors tries to mask the size of the disaster. The United States, buoyed by Marco Rubio's new clout in American diplomacy, and Argentina formed a formidable bloc with Costa Rica, Ecuador, Panama, Peru, Paraguay, and the Dominican Republic.
They are activating the most powerful mechanism, the Inter-American Democratic Charter and the OAS Charter. And what is the real impact of this maneuver?
When a country is prosecuted at the OAS through the Inter-American Democratic Charter for breaking the institutional order, the practical, immediate, and severe consequence is that it can face absolute political isolation and heavy financial restrictions.
The Inter-American Consortium cuts the legs out from under any nation that declares a dictatorship.
What used to be the most listened to voice of leadership and mediation in South America has been reduced to the role of a secondary accomplice to a tiny authoritarian regime.
By embracing Ortega, Brazil's foreign ministry gave the kiss of death to its own credibility. And the direct result is that Brazil is just one step away from being treated as a true pariah state by the world's major powers.
Well, the aged Brazilian relic is already a pariah, even among his globalist circles, when even its friend Macron from France told him to shut up.
And when Brazil unsuccessfully tries to block the activation of this charter, what is the direct impact on the diplomatic passport that we carry? The consequence is that Brazil was humiliated and defeated. The extraordinary meeting of foreign ministers was approved, and Itamaraty was run over by its own neighbors. Lula is no longer the guy adored by the former European democratic bureaucrats. Today, he is persona non grata. He is stuck in the backwardness of a Marxist ideology that has become outdated, defended only by a hysterical social media activist base. They are discovering today theories that failed 80 years ago. And they try to sell them to you as if they were the salvation of humanity. In practical terms, this activism does not have the support of the everyday worker. Without strong popular support, the age relic resorted to a desperate tactic, trying to distance Brazil from the United States for good. But you need to sit down and breathe with me now, because if you truly believe that the current problem is just an annoying bureaucratic disagreement about who runs the country, the extremely poor Central American country, you still haven't seen the board in 3 dimensions. You didn't see the smoke coming from the south. What I'm going to reveal to you now is the second level of today's analysis of this hybrid war. The diplomatic isolation of the current Brazilian government is not merely the incompetence of old negotiators.
It is the pure ideological essence of Celso Amorim and is part of the dark redesign of the architecture of crime. And if you think that the fight right now is already rock bottom,
just wait and see. The terrifying connection between the Brasilia's actions,
the American withdrawal, and the arrival of the new supplier of automatic rifles and intelligence for the cartels and gangs involved in Latin American drug trafficking.
Vladimir Putin's Russian Federation. Yes, my friends. Did you expect this? Brazil is choosing its side in a civilizational war, and you know it.
The current leader receives Russian spies disguised as diplomats in our universities, strengthens ties with the Chinese Communist Party, and throws the country's credibility in the trash to save autocrats.
The United States' response to the advance of this axis of evil in South America will not come in the form of memorandums.
In the end, it will be at gunpoint in the fight against drug trafficking, because the machinery of narco-terrorism has just been engaged by the world's largest espionage force.
The CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States, and the U.S. State Department have drawn up open and incisive plans to conduct surgical and relentless ground operations against drug cartels in Latin America.
And wherever narco-terrorists operate, Uncle Sam's radar is now active. And to structure this hunt, the Americans began to scour the trafficking arteries that suffocate countries like Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, Mexico, and the major factions such as the First Capital Command, PCC, and the Red Command. And what Western intelligence found in the middle of this mess wasn't just coca leaves. They found the steel and dust of weapons smuggled by Russia.
The move is classic, stealthy, yet lethal.
Russia knew that the American crackdown on drugs would tighten. The Russian government tried to get ahead of the disaster
by issuing ridiculous and cowardly statements through its foreign intelligence service.
The SVR, hysterically warning
that the Westerners would create a false accusation that Russia sells weapons to drug cartels in Latin America.
Give me a break.
Do I need to jump through hoops to convince you this is true? Comment here.
Russia tried to sell the grim idea that Ukrainians were stealing weapons from the battlefield and handing them over to drug traffickers.
Look at this cool story. The narrative flaw is shameful.
The system that makes up the axis of evil, Iran, Russia, North Korea, uses South American drug trafficking as a tool for sabotage and the erosion of democracies in the West. The ones who send money, weapons, and drugs back and forth are the operators from Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. They don't send troops down here to the south. They send heavy weaponry and training so that organized crime can do the job of wrecking the economy, shatter freedom, and destroy the peace of the free and democratic countries of the Western Hemisphere. And this is where we find Brazil's huge vulnerability. If there were real sovereignty and an honest desire to protect the Brazilian people, the government of the aging relic would embrace the American offer, just as sovereign governments from Ecuador to Colombia are doing. The Mexican president, even though she is left-wing, understands the force of gravity and tactically allies herself with the United States because she recognizes the firepower of internal enemies. Brazil should lead American ground operations, taking advantage of the anti-terrorism alliance to crush the PCC and Comando Vermelho, who terrorize and kill Brazilian taxpayers every day. They control at least a third of the national territory, a country within another country. But ideological submission to the axis of evil is greater than patriotism. The aged relic cowardly hides behind the false rhetoric of defending national sovereignty just to prevent Western intelligence from wiping out its partners and Russian sponsors from the map. By aligning his rhetoric with Vladimir Putin's and trying to distance Donald Trump, he condemns the nation to serve as a protective shield for the drug trafficking underworld,
keeping Brazil firmly anchored on the wrong side of a third hybrid world war that has already begun to claim lives. Now I want you to take action in today's analysis. Write and repeat in the comments the 2 keywords that serve as the precise verdict of our elite analysis today.
Type now, diplomatic mask.
I repeat, diplomatic mask. Because, my friends, we are in an election period and they might block our channel.
So we're activating our backup channel. If this one goes down, we already have another one prepared and ready to continue our mission. Its name? Blende a sua mente. Yes, shield your mind. The link is in the description, in the pinned comment, and it will appear in the QR code on your screen. Point your phone at it and it will take you straight to the subscribe button for our backup channel.
But look at this!
Don't be naive about how the board will end up arranged.
Donald Trump won't make drastic moves in the south of the continent out of charity or pure benevolence to save the Brazilian people from their bad rulers. The Republican doesn't act on emotion. He plays by power calculus. He will come with the weight of the American state to fiercely protect the United States' zone of influence and security belt against the relentless predation of China and Russia. Supported by Islamic radicalism and Latin American cartels, the imperialist expansion policy that Lula silently supports has already encountered the American concrete wall. The diplomatic siege has already strangled the foreign ministry's channels. American cyber intelligence is sniffing out transfers from Russia to criminal factions.
The cards have already been dealt, and the pieces have already been placed on the board. Have we passed the point of no return? Do you believe that?
The system and comrade dictator thought that the gears of old politics could beat the mathematics of global intelligence. And they terribly miscalculated the American response. The big question hanging over our future, which sends chills through the political class and leaves the armed forces in a silent, anguished holding pattern, is just one. When the storm of global sanctions finally hits and Brazil reaps the bitter fruits of this diplomatic kiss of death, which side of the table will we be on? Where will the Brazilian military command be when the gates are irreversibly opened?
Naivety exacts a price that nations cannot afford to pay.
Ignorance costs you your own freedom. Prepare your mind. Self-protection is strategic. And this week, I received a comment that caught my attention.
Someone said, Shimao, I like you. Shimao, I follow what you say. But Shimao, you don't criticize Trump and he's doing a lot of things wrong.
My friend, stop and think for a minute. Here, we are elite analysts.
It's already obvious to all of us, the human beings, if there are even non-human people, yes, Trump is a human being and he makes mistakes.
But to accuse Trump of this or that, there are millions of channels on YouTube. And I'm not here to make excuses for Trump.
But right now, we need to understand every day how this civilizational war is unfolding.
It doesn't make any sense for me to keep harping on it here whenever Trump makes a crazy statement or makes a controversial decision. Because guys, at the end of the day, we have to look at the pros and cons. And when it comes to Brazil, specifically regarding Brazil, I repeat, even if you don't want it, even if you don't ask for it, anything that Trump does against the cartels, against the Sao Paulo Forum, against Russia, against China, and especially against China. Don't get it twisted.
China is the biggest enemy of the West, and then yes, comes Russia. But China is far ahead of Russia in what it does to control this hemisphere in the hybrid war it wages against the United States.
So it doesn't make sense for us to keep analyzing Trump's antics, but rather to analyze the game that's playing out in real time. But don't worry, when we need to criticize Trump, we'll do it just like we've done before. And one more thing. People complained about what I said.
They say I have to speak like William Bonner. I want you to comment here. Should I change or not? Should I turn into Bonner, all stiff and formal, or should I keep being myself, Shimon Oliveira? Write it down here.
And if you think the real extent of this disaster and the next steps of this alliance will show up in the mainstream news, you still haven't understood how serious the situation is. The advance of censorship doesn't allow the full picture of the ties between Brasilia, Moscow, and crime to be discussed in public.
We won't use filters. That's why we've launched our exclusive platform there, running in a completely censorship-free ecosystem.
Forget the official narratives. From now on, you're coming down to our intelligence bunker. Inside, you join more than 3,000 analysts who help fund the truth here and pore over the map of what really happens in the shadows. Take strategic control of the information you consume, point your phone's camera at the QR code on the screen, or access it through the link in the description and in the first pinned comment. Like I told you, we have two weapons. We have our backup channel on YouTube, and if they take YouTube down, I think that's an extreme strategy, but it's not out of the question.
Then we'll be on another platform that doesn't depend on this one.
It's a platform outside the ecosystem that can be controlled by the state. Well, if they want to, they can take down the internet for the whole country.
But then, my friends, I believe, I don't know about you, that we would experience the Nepal effect here in Brazil, because then there would be absolutely nothing left.
Now, speaking of hybrid warfare, there's a series that premiered on Paramount Plus. It's on Amazon, you can watch it there, and it talks exactly about this hybrid warfare.
China, Russia, United States, Iran, cartels.
Everything is being exposed. I would say that this series
which is from Paramount, which is aligned with the United States government, is the way Americans found to air everything out and tell American citizens what's happening in the world. It's fantastic, guys.
Fantastic. And I only recommend good stuff to you, okay? And you'll find it on our channel with tips about series and movies. The link will appear in the description, in the pinned comment, and in the card. Click on this card and you'll go straight to that channel. Don't leave our ecosystem, okay?
Look, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and leave your like on the video because it takes a lot of work to make.
And if you think this episode is important for you and want millions of Brazilians to receive it too, you can sponsor this video by giving a super thanks, giving it a big thumbs up, or using the information on the screen.
Okay? Point your phone at the QR code and you'll go straight to your system.
Now, shield your mind. Yes, shield your mind. I'm Shimon Oliver, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.